What's the difference between terror and horror? Terror is what the victim of a violent crime feels in the moment they're attacked, and horror is what you feel reading about it online. Most scary movies focus on terrifying the viewer, making them afraid of what's around the corner, nervous for the characters, and on edge for whatever grisly thing will happen next. But few movies have ever horrified me the way Peter Jackson's PG-13 The Lovely Bones does. And in this video, I'll anatomize what makes this film so disturbing, and explain why I call what it does feminist horror. At the beginning of the movie, the child Susie banishes suspense from her earthly story by telling us how it ends.
I was 14 years old when I was murdered on December 6, 1973.
When we're shown it, the scene of her murder proves so powerful not in spite of the fact that it was spoiled for us, but because it was spoiled. When her killer Mr. Harvey lures her into his tomb-like trap, we don't get the suspenseful thrill of any uncertainty as to whether she'll make it out alive. We already know she won't, and instead we're subjected to the nauseating horror of watching her find that out for herself.
Very pretty, Susie.
Thanks.
The Lovely Bones has plenty of flaws, but it's difficult to overstate just how good Jackson's direction is throughout, especially in this horror arc that occupies the first act of the film. The movie opens with an image of confinement, a penguin encased in a snow globe, and the toddler Susie looking past the penguin's cheerful expression and intuiting the darker possibilities of that state of being.
He was all alone in there, and I worried for him.
Jackson relentlessly pursues that intuition, first in a series of destabilizing shots, positioning us as human playthings in Mr. Harvey's dollhouses, then in the sickeningly gradual compression of space that occurs during the scene of Susie's entrapment, beginning with the shrinking distance between the two characters in the wide-open cornfield, then transitioning from the open horizontal of the field to the oppressive verticals of the hideout as the camera drops with Susie into the earth. The progression accelerates with this uneasy composition, to which Mr. Harvey gets added as another imposing vertical when Jackson repeats it. Framings become tighter and tighter as her killer begins to revel in his success. This suffocating loss of personal space culminates in the final horror that Susie's initially unable to face even in the afterlife: the metal safe into which the bag containing her dismembered body was stuffed. By orchestrating such intensifying claustrophobia throughout Susie's entrapment, Jackson finds a visual analog for the constricting and harrowing sense of inevitability that reigns over the scene. Which brings me back to my initial distinction between horror and terror, and how Jackson aims at the former by removing the usual element of uncertainty from the frightening scene. But there's more to it than that. Depictions of these sorts of crimes in movies overwhelmingly tend to focus on the violence itself, making a spectacle of the victim's distress that may trigger our sympathy, but not our empathy. Their suffering is not available to us because as viewers, we are emphatically not in their shoes at that moment. The effect hinges on our distance from them, our non-identification with them. But by omitting the violence, focusing instead on the build-up to it, and telling us in advance how it will end, Jackson manages to represent what happens to Susie in a way that promotes our identification with her. The source of horror here is not the violence itself, but the knowledge that the violence is coming and inescapable. Knowledge that we start with and Susie gradually arrives at, so that the scene and its horror hit their almost unbearable climax at the moment we and Susie become identical in our understanding of her situation.
I have to go.
I don't want you to leave.
As I said at the outset, I consider this to be a feminist treatment of this material, and I mean a couple things by that. The first, which should be obvious from what I've already said, is that it's an unusually sensitive and victim-centered representation of a kind of violence that primarily affects women. And moreover, this allows the filmmakers to deliver something far more haunting and powerful than most explicit sensationalized approaches, which tend to settle for turning stomachs and aim at nothing higher. I've seen a lot in this vein that's revolted me on a merely physiological level. but Susie exploring a bathroom, her assailant's exposed body lying motionless in a tub with his face covered by a washcloth, suspended in a void of nothingness outside of time as she comes to terms with the fact that the blood on the sink and floor is hers, is truly the stuff of nightmares. The second is that Jackson achieves something very rare by making available to any viewer an underexplored conscious state, far more familiar to women than men, that doesn't rise to the level of fear but falls outside the realm of comfort. The passive awareness that you're in the presence of someone who could easily overpower you. Jackson nails it, then shows us the paralytic horror of slipping from awareness that someone could harm you into the realization that they intend to. To be clear, I'm not saying The Lovely Bones is a better movie in this respect because it's feminist, or that it would automatically be bad in this respect if it weren't. What I am saying is that the things that make it better are also the things that make it feminist. And as such, it's a great example of aesthetic and moral imagination going hand in hand. At the same time, the filmmakers exhibit a keen awareness of how fragile that alliance is, as the movie shows how closely the killer's perceptual and creative behaviors, all bent toward evil ends, resemble positive, near universal instincts and habits. If you watch the movie with an eye for this, you'll note the kinship between an innocent crush and a predatory obsession.
I was too busy thinking about the length of Ray Singh's eyelashes. I had counted each one in library time.
Between maternal care and lascivious intent.
Susie, put your hat on, it's cold! Holiday, come inside. Holiday, come here. Come here, boy.
I'm warm. Are you warm? You can take your coat off if you want.
Between an aesthetic impulse grounded in love and one grounded in sadism.
I loved the way a photo could capture a moment before it was gone. My murderer could live in one moment for a long time. He could feed off a memory.
Between an artistic interest and a prurient one.
There are no eyes or mouth either, but we were told to draw on the face.
Your unnecessary anatomical additions got the Ellis boy thoroughly overexcited.
There's a terribly thin line between wanting to share something with another person and wanting to force it on them.
We're creating something here for us, something special.
I know.
It's nice down here, isn't it? Special down here, right?
Yes. It is. It's very special.
Mm-hmm.
Art itself is a powerful means of sharing, and if we're lucky, it can teach us to know the difference.